Um, Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Bimel, and I came to Japan when I was 23 years old, which is many, many years ago. And to tell you the truth, I came to Japan at that time, knowing what I knew at that time and what most people knew at that time. I realized that Japan's biggest secret was Japan itself, because none of my contemporaries and most people who I knew and what I was reading in the States to prepare myself for a trip to Japan, to live in Japan, told me very little. And I realized that Japan was Japan's biggest secret. And I thought coming to Japan, I assumed that Japan was a minor culture. The major cultures were Italy and China and India and Great Britain and Germany, et cetera, et cetera. And I came to Japan, and within a couple of days, I realized that this is probably the most extraordinary culture that I couldn't even imagine. It was like a world without end. And after 50 years living and working in and out of Japan, that the depth of Japan keeps speaking to me, and daily I'm experiencing more and more. And I still feel like I know just this little tiny bit about one of the most major cultures in the world. So I fell in love with crafts immediately upon arrival. I came from Los Angeles, where we were eating off of plastic dishes, where we were eating TV dinners. Everything was frozen and canned at that time in the 50s and 60s. I think some of you may remember that time. And I came to Japan. Things were handmade, made by hand, with love, with care. I fell in love with it. And over the past 50 years, I've watched that extraordinary craft culture just nosedive. And so 5 years ago, we decided to start JapanCraft21, and I'm going to share screen with you right now. Give me a second here. Okay. So JapanCraft21, revitalizing crafts for the 21st century. If you take all of the crafts, when I speak of crafts, I'm speaking about master crafts, as Andy described, passed down from century to century, honed and refined and refined and refined in a way that we all know the Japanese are total masters. If you take all those crafts that exist everywhere in the world and you put them on the right side, I venture to say Japan has more than most, if not all, of the world combined. There are 1,300 traditional crafts in Japan. When we look at this chart, however, we look at 1979, where the number of master craftsmen were about 300,000. Then we moved to 2015, it's about 50,000. And if you look at the next slide here, we estimate by 2028, there will be 20,000 left, which means 92% of the powerhouse of craftsmanship for the entire world will be gone in the next by 2028. So this was the impetus for starting an organization. It's time to go on the roof and scream fire, because Japan's best kept secret, which is Japan, is still Japan's best kept secret. People in the West don't know about this, and unfortunately, most Japanese aren't aware of it either. So our mission is to identify problems, to create strategies, to take action. We're a small organization, so we're able to move, we're able to make decisions on the spot, and we're able to take action. So identifying problems, the first problem we noticed was there's not even a list of all the crafts in Japan. There are 1,300 crafts. We can only find a list of 250. So our initiative was to create, our first initiative was create a research program. So we started to document. And document. So we've gotten to about 500 crafts which we have identified, and we hope to have all at least up to 1,000 within the next few months. The next problem was everyone has a very simplistic reason for this happening. People say, oh, young people are this way, or the city people are that way. They're very simplistic reasons, but we did in order to really understand it, we did a very deep dive into the causes. And so just a very few of those many reasons, and it's very complex why this culture is evaporating. Disappearing mentors, the company presidents of the during the Meiji period, the Taisho period, and the early Showa period, all studied tea. They had tea rooms. They were mentors. They were mentors for the community. They commissioned works. And by the 1970s, most of those people were playing golf, and tea has just disappeared. Tea was a major factor in crafts up until about 25 years ago. Two generational families. When I came to Japan, many people were living with their parents and their children. So grandparents taught children, and they exposed them to culture in the two generation families. That just hasn't happened to a great degree. The third thing is that mom and pop businesses cannot compete with the PR of corporate business. So Buddhist temples who rely on funerals for their income are being wiped out by commercial mortuaries that provide very simple turnkey funerals. Weavers and dyers cannot compete with Louis Vuitton and Chanel. And carpenters cannot compete for the PR of these factory-built housing companies, which it's a matter of PR. It's a matter of creating markets. So the next problem was the word craft. Something that your grandchild makes in summer camp and something that a master artist makes, a 6 foot tall, 2 meter tall celadon vase, are both considered crafts. So we had to come up with a way of at least defining for ourselves what crafts are and what we are trying to do. So we created 4 categories: the master artist craft, where one-of-a-kind pieces are made. When I say the word master indicates centuries and centuries of methodology, focus, refining handed down from generation to generation. So the master artist crafts, they produce one-of-a-kind or very limited editions for a small group of people. The master artisan, however, use the same time-proven methodology, skills, but they can make the same thing over and over and over, which creates economy of scale, and it brings the price down so it could be affordable for the general public. Crafts are things we see in every culture. They're fine, they're good, they're functional, they're well made, but they don't require centuries of tradition. It's something you can go to a trade school, and within a reasonable period of time, you can learn to make things like this. And they're part of our culture, and we need to honor those things. And then finally, hobby crafts. This is where you can take weekend classes at a community center and learn how to make things like this. And these are wonderful as well. So we try and honor everything. The master artist crafts, number 1, and I'm going to show you a number of their works today. They are pretty well supported by the gallery system. But the master artisan crafts, those unnamed craftspeople all over Japan, those are the people who are disappearing rapidly. And these are the people for which we put most of our effort. Problem, in Kyoto, the machiya of Kyoto, there were 60, 70 years ago, there were 100,000. Now there are 40,000. They're being torn down almost on a daily basis. So we decided to support a small construction company which wanted to build new machiya. But the problem was there were no young carpenters that could do joinery. They weren't being taught this anymore. So we started a school where we teach working young carpenters how to build buildings without nails. And they're able to build things like this. We've already graduated over the past 3 years, 12 young carpenters who can now build something like this. They were already trained as carpenters, but not in joinery, not in traditional ways. They could use all the machinery and electric hammers and things like that. But problem, there are no young plasterers who could make a beautiful mud wall. I wouldn't say no, generally they're not being taught how to do this. So it's very difficult to find someone who could do this anymore. So we started an 18-month program. We trained 5 young plasters, working plasters, how to make a mud and bamboo wall. Problem, the Nishijin kimono industry is past meltdown. It's almost gone. And there are dyers who are in the 70s, 80s, and 90s who have no one to take over their techniques. They're the only ones who know how to do certain things. And so we started an apprentice program where we fund the living expenses of 3 apprentices, and so they can study full-time with these aging dyers. And so these techniques will live on. And we also have a way to market these with a producer is marketing these kimono, and they're selling really, really well. Problem, nobody knows when I say no one, the world doesn't realize what an extraordinary powerhouse of crafts exists here. So we have an online social media program where we promote these things. We have online monthly programs where we speak about Japanese gardens and architecture and aesthetics. So keeping people who are engaged with Japan, educating them, expanding the awareness that this culture is a powerhouse which has affected and inspired the world for 150 years, and we want to make sure it stays. The problem we found, there were so many problems. There's so many problems that we didn't know where to begin. So we decided to have a contest to have young craftspeople tell us what their problems are, come up with great ideas for revitalizing a genre of a craft for the 21st century, and then supporting them with a very vigorous program. So this is our 3rd year. We partnered with the Asia Society in Japan to promote our contest. We now have, from the past, from 2 earlier contests, last year before, we have 21 craftspeople who we are supporting, promoting in many, many ways. We are now in the process of adding 6 to this group. So we'll have 27 people who we call craft leaders. So we introduced them to architects' offices. We introduced them recently we had a big meeting with Kengo Kuma, with Gensler Corporation. We provide many opportunities for them to show what they can do. And this is one of the things that they can do, that we've chosen really extraordinary craftspeople for our group. So the problem is the world doesn't know the depth of this craft tradition, this master craft tradition. So today I'm going to just give you a little bit of an idea of the kinds of programs in which we give to the general public. And so we're going to be covering all these 10 different crafts, what has been done traditionally and what is being done today. So we're going to start with ceramics, and we're going to start, these are the 5 we'll be doing, and we're going to start with celadon. And we chose celadon because the first thing is, celadon is the holy grail of ceramics for Asia for the past 1,200 years. And Japan is, at this point, is really leading the world in celadon. So before I show that slide, when you think of celadon, what color do you think of? I think many people think of 1 or 2 colors, but these are actually all the colors of celadon. It's an amazing range of colors. These are all considered celadon. And So these glazes, as with more iron in the glaze, you get more olive color, and as you decrease the amount of iron, you get green, then even less is blue, and then this is all combined with a well-timed reduction of oxygen in the kiln. Celadon is the most difficult ceramic to make. It's not uncommon to lose 80% of a firing. It has to be absolutely perfect. And this is the kind of Celadon which was made in the 1600s to present in Japan. This is a very traditional Chinese style. And this is contemporary Celadon work being made right now by world-class Celadon artists. You notice this has no crackles in it, yet this piece has crackles, and crackles are produced by speeding up the cooling process. So if you cool something quickly, the crackles will appear, but if you cool it slowly, the clay body and the glaze will cool together, and then there are no crackles. This is one of the showpieces of many museums in the world, including the Met, Japan, the Boston MFA. Rakuware, a Japanese, unlike Celadon, Rakuware is born in Japan. And, I was in the tour business for 30 years. And I don't think in all those years, I met more than half a dozen people who knew who Sen no Rikyu was. And Sen no Rikyu to me is probably, in the world of aesthetics, he's probably in the top 5 in the entire history of the world in terms of what we know as in terms of aesthetics. He expanded the Japanese upper class appreciation of ceramics from this Chinese Celadon to include the Raku bowl, which he invented. And so this bowl whereas the Celadon was perfect, this is an obsession for imperfection, for a natural feel. You can feel the fingerprints of the potter on the bowl. It's cool to the touch. It's lumpy. It's asymmetrical. Yet, unlike the cold beauty of this Celadon piece, this has a warmth that becomes more beautiful every day. And then 15 generations later, from the first Raku potter in the same family line, is producing work like this. So Raku lives on. Somehow it got to be pronounced Raku in the US, but we all know it's Raku. Hagiware, another of the kilns which were created due to the inspiration of Sen no Rikyu. So Rikyu fell in love with Korean rice bowls in the late 1500s. He thought they had such warmth and natural beauty that he would import these bowls to be used as tea bowls at the highest level of Japanese society. These are very inexpensive bowls in Korea at the time. And then this gave birth to the kilns of Hagi in Western Japan. And they still have the same warmth, the same appeal, the same that same soft sensibility. This piece, you'll notice that it's very pink. The pink colors are encouraged by having a higher oxygen level in the kiln. If you go less oxygen, you get more of a blue color. Yakshime, which would mean pieces which are fired without glaze, and shigaraki is one of the great kilns which produce shigaraki. This is a jar from the 1200s. Rikyu fell in love with that aesthetic, that natural aesthetic of just fire, wood, and clay. That's all it is, and to create things like this. And then by using the Anagama kiln, which came to Japan in the 400s from Korea, if you look at this kiln, if you could see where the pieces are placed will determine what it looks like. So, for example, when you go far from the kiln, the fire, the pieces are very pale, and when you get close to the fire, you get all these effects from the wood ash, which melts on the surface of the pieces and the scorching of the fire. So beginning with this piece, if you look inside it, you can see how pale the clay is. Shigaraki clay is a tan color, very light. And these white spots are bits of feldspar, which are purposely left in the clay, and they explode on the surface to give it this very rough-hewn feel. And then the red would be scorch marks from the fire, the flames. So we get closer to the fire. This piece, the feldspar pebbles have been removed, and you see these these tan spots. This is hidatsuki, is the technique. You take a cracker-shaped piece of very brittle clay and stick it on the side of the pot, and it becomes a resist. So after it's fired, you remove it, and you see what the clay looked like before. This is getting closer to the fire. You notice the color is getting darker. You notice that there's a spot in the front. It's a very pale spot. So if you can think of the fire coming from the direction where you're sitting, and there's a pot right in front of that, that will block the fire, the flames. And so what's behind it will be pale. And that's one of the great techniques, or the great skills of a master potter, is knowing where in the kiln you'll get what effect. So master potters know their kilns perfectly. This piece was at the bottom of the kiln. You can see this is this white, and this white surface is ash, which is encrusted on the surface of the piece. This piece, you can see that those are seashells upon which the piece was laid on its side so it wouldn't stick to the bottom. If you look at this piece, you'll see that the ash comes in through the air from the fire, and it just lands on the top of the piece, and then it vitrifies, it turns into glass or glaze, and then it drips down in those streams. And when you turn it up right side up, this is what it looks like. This piece is right at the very front of the kiln. It has the benefit of all that creamy ash, which dripped down the side. On the right side, that's the ash which was on the floor of the kiln, which accumulated and encrusted on the side of the piece. Kutani ware and places which were inspired by Kutani. So this is a Kutani piece from the 1700s, which was actually made in Imari, traditional piece. And this is what is a 21st century Kutani artist is doing. And of course, his works are all through the Metropolitan Museum in New York and the Boston MFA, collected around the world. With a rimpa aesthetic from the late early 1700s. Tokudai Yasukichi III brought overglazed enamel to the highest level in the history of the world, and he became a living national treasure for that district, the Kutani district in Kanazawa, Ishikawa Prefecture, and inspired other potters to follow suit and to really push the envelope and create amazing things. So enamel is not something you buy in a hardware store. It's made from glass which has been ground to the consistency of powder. Lacquer is one of the holy grail of lacquer now is in Japan. It has been since the 1300s. Lacquer also is not something you buy at a hardware store. It's the most expensive coating in the world. It's also the hardest coating in the world. You can get 200 grams or 6 ounces from one tree total. So it's very precious. These are pieces which you see in Japanese restaurants around the world, very ubiquitous pieces, work by Ogata Korin from around the year 1700. And then works being done today by master lacquer makers. Inlaid mother of pearl with gold, inlaid seashells, mother of pearl. This is a surfboard mother of pearl surfboard by our grand prize winner in our contest 2 years ago. This piece is 1 meter wide, and it's not made from a wood base. It's called dry lacquer, kanshitsu, and it's made from layer upon layer of hemp cloth and lacquer, So it's sculpted into this shape. And the gloss is so deep, you can literally see your face in it clearly. Bamboo basketry has really taken off, especially in the last 30, 40 years in the West. Pieces like this, even though it's a fairly contemporary 20th century works like this were seen in Japan, imported as early as the 1500s. Chinese style, Chinese works which are very symmetrical, braided with braids, with very, very, very uniform. And then we see in the 20th century works of a Japanese style. So this would be referred to as Chinese style, or karamono, and this would be a Japanese style wamono. So you see that it has a real Japanese folk inspiration, rough-hewn, asymmetrical, very powerful. These are all baskets which are used for flower arrangement. This is with the mid-century sensibility. Isuguro Kansai was considered one of the great kings of Japanese basketry in the 20th century. These are all one-of-a-kind collector's items. These are not made in factories by any means. This Honda Shori, one of the artists who brought us into the 21st century. It's just bamboo. The tools are very simple. It's all handmade. The great Tori Ippo. I think there should be another I after Tori. This artist adds gold as accents to the bamboo. And Chiku Unsai, the fourth, he's in addition to being creating one-of-a-kind pieces for functional work, he creates these large installations in museums and various venues all over the world. Barrels and cedar buckets. We've all seen these everywhere in Japan, and every sushi restaurant in the world will have something like this. And Nakagawa Shuji and other young bucket makers are now using the same methodology to create things for use in 21st century, such as this champagne bucket or these stools. Glass has never been huge in Japan traditionally, but we do see glass back in the Edo period. We see the Edo Kiriko glass, which is European style cut glass. But in the last 30 years, Japanese glass artists have really come to the forefront and really infusing their work with a real Japanese sensibility. If you look at glass from all over the world, you can almost always pick out the Japanese artists because they have a certain refinement and sensibility. The work of Kuramata Shiro, one of the great designers of the 20th century in the world, worked with the Mihoya Glass Company. The Mihoya Glass Company can make anything out of glass. They are the world's genius glass fabricators. And Kuramata's iconic glass chair. Metalwork, of course, we're all familiar with the traditional kettle for tea. And contemporary metal artists are doing amazing things to push the envelope. This is gold and copper. This is enamel. on copper, as is this one. Again, enamel is glass ground to the consistency of talcum powder. It's and melted in the kiln. Weaving, probably the greatest weaving on the planet. At least the top 2 or 3 cultures that do weaving. Japan, with their 3-dimensional weaving, is really the leader. This is a work by the Tatsumura company. This pattern was from the Silk Road from the 600s and 700s, and about 120 years ago, the Tatsumura family, the head of that family, recreated the 1,000-year-old Nara loom to be able to weave these patterns again. It took a long time to recreate a loom that had been gone for 1,000 years, but he did it, and now patterns like this are back into the Japanese culture. We can see them everywhere. And then the Tatsumura family is doing weaving such as this. This is, again, 3-dimensional weaving today. This is commissioned by the imperial family. There are over 100 colors in this piece. Hikihaku is one of the great unknowns. I have yet to meet a Japanese person, or let's say I've almost never met a Japanese person who understands this process. But it's gold, silver, or platinum leaf is affixed to washi paper in patterns, and then it's cut very, very thinly, and then woven into silk to produce the Nishijin obi. So this is 50% washi paper. Only can be done in one neighborhood. There are only 4 people left that can do this, where there were 50 about 40 years ago. Dyeing, again, at the top of the world's fabrication. This would be a typical, let's say, a traditional yuzen, painted with tiny brushes, dyed with tiny brushes. With all, it's if you look carefully, there's so much gradation of color within each leaf, each petal. And then people today doing work like this. This is a stencil die, randomly placed to give it a lot of life, and then down the middle it's yuzen. So it's very contemporary, very simple for kimono. This is another dye process. It's dyed, and then 60% of the dye is removed, then it's dyed again, then 60% is removed, and it's dyed again to give this wonderful blurry pattern. Gold and silver. This is silver being affixed to silk. One of the patterns which our producer is now creating for kimono. Very, very contemporary, very simple, and selling very well. These are, of course, practically one-of-a-kind pieces. They only make a few of each one. So it's really haute couture at its highest level. Look at this pattern here. This is stencil dye, but if you look at the random quality, the randomness gives it a lot of life. If everything's stamped out perfectly, it really lacks a lot of power. This is a kind of dyeing which is called sumi nagashi. It's using sumi ink in water, in silk. And this is very difficult because you don't get to experiment too much. It's a very difficult process. And there are contemporary yuzen dyers using the same technology, the same methods to create clothes, more of contemporary casual clothes. Indigo dye has been in Japan for 1,300 years. For kasuri ikat, yarn is dyed in patterns with resists, and then it's woven into these patterns. So it has a kind of a blurry kasuri effect. And we see contemporary indigo artists are doing amazing things. This piece was dyed 40 times to create that gradation of color effect. It's all pure indigo, the same way it's been done for 1,300 years. No chemicals, nothing added. This is all shibori. Very, very difficult. This is dyed many, many times to get that blur effect of each of those dots. This is Fukumoto Shihoko-san. She's one of the great indigo artists in the world. A contemporary no theater costume. And Fukumoto-san's tea rooms made out of hemp, and they're in museums in the US now. Washi, of course, we all know and love washi, and there are hundreds and hundreds of styles made all over the country, hand by hand. And we know what fusuma are, and very simple, very beautiful, very functional. And there are artists who are using fusuma and washi to create interiors, which are very dynamic. And this is all poured washi. This was not painted. It was all poured, different colored fibers in the water. Horiki Eriko has revolutionized washi by being able to make pieces of such size that everyone said she couldn't do it. It was impossible. And now has these installations in architectural sites all over the world. Just the same washi, kozo, mulberry bark. Figurative craft, we're all familiar with these types of dolls, which you saw many of these in the 60s and 70s as tourists were bringing them back in glass boxes from Japan. But very few people are aware of the figurative art in Japan, which people outside of Japan are not aware of this tradition, this modern, which has become a modern tradition of figurative art. Look at the details, are just extraordinary. Look at the fingers on them. Statuary. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to speak about statuary. So if you indulge me, we're going back to Egypt, but I think this might be interesting for you. We go back to 4,000 years ago. This was an Egyptian statue, and this statue inspired the Greeks for 2,300 years ago. And the Greeks inspired the Romans 2,100 years ago. And the Romans inspired the Gandhara people from Gandhara of Afghanistan and Pakistan 1,900 years ago to make the first Buddhist statues. And then the Gandharans inspired the Indians 1,700 years ago. The Indians inspired the Chinese about 1,700 years ago. And the Chinese inspired, and the Koreans inspired the Japanese. So this is a Japanese statue from about the 600s. And then we see something from about the 800s. And then about the year 1000. And then we start to get towards the Kamakura period, which was the golden age of Buddhist statuary for all of Asia. Such realism had never been seen. And then contemporary Buddhist statuary with a modern sensibility.
Steve, I wonder if I might jump in here.
Yes.
I see you have only one category left.
Yes.
However, strategically, I would love to leave that one for our next go around, so people will be ready to finish the story.
Great.
And I thank you very much for that erudite and excellent overflight. And clearly, it warrants another hour. And I want to apologize to everybody for cutting out just at the very important point of introducing Steve, but I'm glad you guys covered so much ground without me, but I hope you can hear me now. And
Yes.
I'd like to take that time to bring in some questions, because we want to go forward and take action that you've very effectively called to us. Real quickly, if I could, just to frame that, I got 4 takeaways from that overview. Obviously, a reminder of the richness of Japanese master crafts over the centuries. The criticality, we're not talking about a challenge in these areas a couple decades down the road. We're counting it in years, so thank you for that. The range of the problems was kind of daunting. Economic, social, just a host of issues you're trying to overcome. And the 4th and most important piece, how ambitious JapanCraft21 is, the way you're attacking this through apprenticeships, workshops, speaker programs, contests. It's marvelous to see you rallying this way. That last piece, I think that got cut off. As I said, this is a natural for Japan-America societies in America and in Japan. That's how we met you. And we believe that we can benefit from knowing what you're doing, enjoy learning about crafts, but also support the mission. So if I could take one quick question to you, what would be your suggestion to Japan-America societies on both sides of the Pacific? How can we learn more, be involved, and support this important effort?
That's a fantastic question. And okay, there are programs which we already have in place, which we would love to have support for on any level. But what I'm thinking is that the Japan-America societies have so much talent, so many people who have a passion for Japan, that I would like to see, ideally, some call to act, some project where people came together and just did something, saving one craft. You can figure there are hundreds. You have something like 500 members in the States, something like that.
We have 11,000 individual members.
Okay, well, even more so then, 11,000 members. For example, there's only one person left who can make needles for embroidery, and she's in her 70s, and there's and whether her son takes over or not, we don't know. There's stories like this. There are people that make a certain kind of charcoal which is necessary for sword making, and they're in their 70s. There's no one to take over. Is there one project that this huge 11,000 member group can tackle and say, yes, we're going to save that? It's not, for 11,000 people to create something, the next generation of one more person making embroidery needles. It's not a big, huge thing, but it would be something that it would be a benchmark. We did this. We saved a craft of Japan. I would love to see that as a first step, and to start very small and not too ambitious. And I can give you dozens and dozens of suggestions, and there may be something that really resonates with you. Let's save one damn craft. Let's just save it. Because there are symposiums that are going on ad infinitum about talking about things, lamenting things, and they just end with, we'll see you next time. I just want to save one more craft. That would be my dream for this first step with Japan-America societies and America-Japan societies as well. Andy, are you there? Did we lose your voice again?
I'm sorry. I am back, and thank you for that concrete action. Small but meaningful. I bet there's some other either ideas or questions from the group. So if anybody would like to raise a e-hand or jump in, please. Question for Steve.
There's some questions in the chat, I believe, aren't there? Maybe, are there?
I'd like to say something real quick. I think one way we can support these different crafts is to support the various expositions, festivals, or whatever that show off these crafts, and maybe having a way to better advertise crafts to the general public, to all of our societies, things like that might be a good thing to do. For example, I live here in Japan. I discovered through a friend who's a big Kokeshi fan about the large Kokeshi festival every year in Naruko Onsen in Miyagi-ken. It's a fantastic festival, and to see some of these artists doing their work in real time and watching them is just amazing to me. I think there's probably a variety of other places where artisans do their work. I just don't know where that is. I'm a big fan of Tsugaru Nuri lacquerware, for example, but I don't know that there's any place to watch them do it. I just go and buy it every once in a while when I can afford it. That's all. Thanks.
That's a really brilliant comment, Eric. There are 14 million foreign tourists that come to Japan every year now. And when you go online to all these clickbait sites say, oh, the 10 best things to do in Japan, and it's about some shrine, someplace where there an anime was made, or the 10 best places to get takoyaki in Osaka, which are fine. This is all part of pop culture, but we're sacrificing the greatest powerhouse of craftsmanship in the world to find out a place for an octopus dumpling. You know, I think that needs to be addressed. We at JapanCraft21 from next month will have a listing of all the exhibitions in Japan where you can see really magnificent things, which this kind of exhibition list does not exist at this time. So we have created this, but I love the idea of having the Kokeshi Festival on there. I took many groups to Naruko Onsen to see lacquer work done there, and the lacquer work is really fine there, and the Kokeshi as well. So it's brings back very fond memories for me.
Those are two great ideas, Eric and Steve, and drawing attention and participating in these festivals, especially in Japan, is wonderful. But if I could highlight one more, we've got this network across the US and our 4 time zones represented today, to both enjoy and learn about the crafts, but be hit over the head on this call to action. I think an excellent step might be for us to find a way to use technology, because all can't come over to the festivals or to your workshops, but to live stream some of the activity. So you're learning about the craft, and you're then also understanding the criticality, the challenge of passing centuries-old traditions down. So that would be something that I would put in a request for, something that could be done fairly low cost and just involve hundreds of these individuals across the US to learn about the craft, but really be impressed upon the need for action. And I think that will lead to other saving that needlepoint work will flow from that type of direct, authentic content with what you're doing in the contests, the workshops on the ground in Japan. Thanks.
I think there are comments on the chat box.
Okay, can
I read?
Please do. If you do that, Yoko-san, that would be great.
Okay, I'm from JapanCraft21. Okay, hello everyone, and I will read. One person said, where can we see the artists you represent? Secondly, do you or the artists you represent distinguish art and craft?
So where can you see the people we represent? We're about to launch a site where we're highlighting our first 10 winners, and then we'll be adding our second 10 winners very shortly after that. So this is in the making. You will be able to see their work on, and you can also see their work on our website as well. But we've created a platform for them to really show the world what they can do. And the second question was, I'm sorry.
Okay, do you or the artist you represent distinguish art and craft?
Okay, so this is one of the great questions of throughout the art world for the past 50 years. I don't know if I can answer that in the next 30 seconds, but we have mostly functional craftspeople in our group, but we have a couple people who do one-of-a-kind work as well. So we're focusing mostly on people who do repetitive work, larger quantities. It's not, when I say large quantities, they're making 30 or 40 instead of 1 or 2. So it brings the cost down. So this is the level which we're supporting.
Okay, and the next person said, can you point us to resources that we can share with our members? I'm sure you have videos, stories, tour information, or other thing you have prepared that we could include in our newsletters or other materials.
Well, yes, Andy and I have been speaking about doing presentations such as this again. And so if there's interest, we will make this available. So in terms of presentations, at this point, we have tour information. I'm not in the tour business anymore. I've retired from that. So now I'm focusing on crafts. So videos and stories, if you go online and look up Japanese crafts, there are infinite number of videos and stories that are available. I mean, I don't know if we need to recreate this, but what all of those other people are not doing is they're not giving call to action to actually save something. And this is what we are trying to do.
Other questions from the floor or the chat?
No chat for now.
So someone wants to know our contact information. You can contact. How should we do this? Should we go through your organization?
Sure. For JAS related programming interests or setting up another event like this, please contact Makiko Muratani and Andrew Wailagala. Makiko put up in the chat the website for JapanCraft21 as well. And we can put up, Steve, if you want to designate some emails, we're happy to distribute those to the registrants or put it in the chat now.
It's very simple, to info@JapanCraft21.com.
Very good. And a last call for any more thoughts. We've gone just a bit over our hour, but any last comments from AJS, JAS, or somebody who's not in either organization but wants to be involved? Any last thoughts? If not, seeing any hands.
I have one last thought. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Please. No. Please.
So I don't know what kind of coffee cup or teacup you're using, but I don't think we have time. There's time left in our lives for a manufactured cup that says, I love Toronto on it for $5. I mean, I drink out of this cup, and it's a Shigaraki cup. Is about $40. And every time I drink out of this cup, I receive something really special. I can feel the artist's hand, and the handle broke off, but I love it so much I keep using it. This speaks to me. It has culture, it has depth, it has heart to heart, and something we're at a point now where we can embrace things made by hand, or we can just go to AI and just embrace a sterile world. And I'd say if you have a cup that says, I love Kansas City, that you bought for $5, I would think about what that is doing for the fulfillment in your life at that moment. Is that fulfilling you? Or is it just something that's you just a tool for drinking? Drinking water can be an absolute pleasure from something like this. So just a little seed of thought. I'd love to have you involved with what we're doing. I'd love to be involved with you're doing it, that we could do something together that's meaningful and that's effective.
That's great, Steve. That's a good practical call to action. This was a wonderful presentation, both for the factual content and the passion that you have for the subject material that comes through, the calls to action. We may not have a roadmap yet, but we're taking the first steps down the road. So I'd like to say thank you to Yoko Hioki from JapanCraft21 as well. Thank you for putting this wonderful presentation together and sharing it with both sides of the Pacific. So thanks very much, and we'll be looking for the follow-on to this activity as soon as we can arrange it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you all coming today.